West of the Rockies, Y2K. How can we prepare?
Drop a machine and radios, throw them into darkness for a few hours.
Fighting for our lives, family must survive.
5,000 gallons of gas, air, water filtration.
Coming at you from the frozen tundra that is East Central Alberta, Canada, streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Rumble, and Odyssey. Welcome back to the workshop where we create community, find freedom, promote preparedness, and share success. I am Toolman Tim. Today is March the 8th, 2024, and this is episode 432 of Workshop Radio. How is everyone out there? It is just wonderful to be here. I love seeing you. Let's open up with rules to live by. I hope everyone's doing really well. All right. I put it into our good old randomizer machine. And what did I get back? Rule number 17. And it is one of the simplest rules out there. It's something that Dad has instilled in me over the years, and that is buy once, cry once. Or in Dad's words, it pays Tim to buy quality. And what does that mean? Well, it doesn't mean that you have to buy the absolute best of something, but if you can afford it, buy the best you can afford. Now, that also doesn't mean if it's a tool you're only going to use once in your entire life, you don't need to go out and spend $10,000 for a top tier tool. But what it really means is if it's something you're going to use, it's something you're going to use on a regular basis for the rest of your life, you'll almost always be better off spending some money on something that's quality. Now, quality doesn't always mean the most expensive thing either. But part of this for me, and I've been asked this many times, why don't you have a lot of negative reviews on your channel? And the main reason is because I do my due diligence long before I ever end up purchasing something. So that's doing the reading other people's reviews, going up and down Amazon, watching stuff on YouTube. And again, buy once, cry once. Maybe we could add a little bit, do your research ahead of time. But if you do those things, you're going to end up saving yourself a lot of money because there's a lot of shit. Let me go back one more time here and talk about the tool bag that I put together for Delinquent Scully last year. That is a prime example of not listening to rule number 17, buy once, cry once, because I ended up deciding to go to Harbor Freight and putting together one of the best, that's the wrong word, Tim, putting together a tool bag of tools there for a couple $100, thinking, I'm not really going to need them that much. Well, guess what? I sure as shit did. And almost the instant I bought them, took them out of their package and broke them in, I totally regretted that purchase. So I'm taking a lot of my good tools down with me, and I'm going to buy better tools this time around. So when it comes down to it, it 100% pays to buy quality. So, all right, folks, everybody else out there, it's great to see you. I know this is Friday, not Thursday. I really, truly thought I had all of the gremlins fixed. Well, I do not know what. I just heard Chris Dixon said there was an echo on the intro. I'd pull my hair out if I had any hair left to pull out, folks, because we did a test stream. I had 4 or 5 people in on it with me here a week ago. Everything worked 100%, and boom, just like that. So we will get to the bottom of this. But in the meantime, we may not have the transitions. I'm not going to do the transitions in between segments until we figure out what the hell, what gremlins we've had in here. And again, guys, it's the joys of being live. It's live and it's Saturday night, except it's Friday night and not Saturday Night Live. So there you go. All right. What is next? Our next segment is dropping the dime on precious metals. I'll do my best to do my deep voice radio impersonation there. Let's bring this up and see what we got for you guys. So the first one we have, this is a cool one. So this week it comes from AU Bullion and .ca. So it's a Canadian website, which, for what it's worth. But this is all about testing silver at home. I came across a Reddit thread and some comments in one of the channels that I follow quite regularly. And they were saying, how can you be sure especially, okay, in a situation, let's say an off-grid, a down-grid situation where money doesn't, paper money doesn't buy what it used to, and you're needing to, exchange via precious metals. How in the world are you going to know that that precious metal that you have or that someone's trying to give you is going to be legitimate? Well, first off, here's some things you can do. And this is something, any of these you can be done at home on a now. So it'd be something, again, remember, skills are better than supplies. In this instance, there's a couple of things you might want to have for supplies, but practicing these things ahead of time might, help you out. One thing I would say, there's a couple where you're putting a chemical onto the silver. Wouldn't do it on something that's worth more than the silver, like a collector's coin or something like that. But I would practice it because it can tarnish the silver finish. So maybe use some old junk silver or something. So what do we got here? All right, number one, the first one to look for is identification labels. And, this should make sense to most folks who have been around silver a fair bit. And any one of these doesn't necessarily mean that it's real, but all of them together can kind of help you build a case and kind of help you build a Sherlock Holmes on this and say, oh, you know what? It is okay. Here we are. All right. Identification labels. Number one, you're going to look all around the silver, and it's probably going to be small. You're probably going to need to use your old man glasses like me and use a zoom feature on your phone. But you're going to see something like a 925, a 900, or an 800. And that's going to tell you. Rachel Brown asks, I'll get to this here in a sec too, but wants to know, so I shouldn't try testing your silver? Yes, that's right. Yeah. So identification labels, number one. Now, again, just because there's a label on there doesn't mean that it's legitimate, okay? But all of this came about when I ended up finding this one, the ice cube test. I thought, oh, yes, and Nate says 3 or 4 nines, and that is true because some are triple nines, some are quadruple purity nines. Now, the ice test, this one was really cool. This approach is perfect for checking silver coins and other flat-surfaced silver objects. Put an ice cube on a piece of silver cutlery or a coin. The metal you own, if the metal you own is real, the ice cube will melt sooner than other types of metal. The ice cube will melt relatively quickly when placed on silver since it has the maximum thermal conductivity, something I hadn't heard of before. Again, this is one of those things you're going to want to test it before you go down this rabbit hole. But it's a second kind of tool in the arsenal that could help you learn. Number 3, bleach. Bleach can also be used to determine whether silver metal is genuine. Just dab a tiny bit of bleach onto the silver object. If it is silver and it tarnishes when exposed to oxidizing substances like bleach, when in contact with bleach, genuine silver will become black. So again, put a little dab of bleach. And again, you're not going to want to put this on something like a collector's coin that has a premium on it. But if this is, I'd like to take some silver for some bread, or I'd like to buy some silver from somebody. Now, you might say, but Tim, how do I tell if it's silver all the way through? Maybe it's just silver plated. And I'm really glad you asked that. 2 more. Rare earth magnet test. So if you have a rare earth magnet, or if you don't, maybe it's worth getting one. Place your silver object on top of a wooden table or another non-magnetic surface. Try placing your magnet close to the object to see if it attracts anything. Here you go. If it doesn't attract, there's a really good chance it's silver. If it does attract, there's a good chance that it's some sort of cheap metal clad in silver. Now, the final one requires you to order a little testing kit. Now, this is not a $3,000 biometric scanning kind of tester like you'll see at these big shops, but it's an acid test. These tests can be done at home, but a unique silver acid test kit is required. They're readily available on Amazon or eBay. So you grab the tiny black stone tile that was included with it, grab your piece of silver or sterling silver, and gently move a discrete portion of it across the black stone. So the stone acts like a little bit of a file. So you want to find a spot where you're not going to ruin the silver and just scrape into it just a little bit. Then you're going to put it on a piece of paper towel and you're going to drizzle a little bit of the acid on the coin. Then you're going to wipe it off almost immediately. And in a few seconds, here's what happens. If it's bright red, it's fine silver. Darker red, it's 925 silver. brown, it's 800 silver, and blue, it's nickel. Wah, wah. So those are neat. Any one of those can be done with stuff you have around the house, except for the last one, the testing with acid. So I would be pretty confident if it had an identification label, if it passed the ice test, if it passed the bleach test, and it passed the magnetic test, I'd probably be pretty comfortable taking it in on a trade. Now, I might not take enough to buy, a brand new Dodge Ram or something like that, but I am going to take it for trade and that sort of thing. So any one of those would be good. The rare earth magnet test and the bleach test would be two that you could do almost instantly right there and be done with it. So yeah, I kind of enjoyed it. And I thought maybe I'd pass on a little bit of that information to you fine folks this week. So off-grid ping, let's take a look at the community and what everybody has to say. It says, I was slacking cooking dinner for the boys. Thanks for the reminder. And what else? Nate says, I've seen guys doing that with gold and silver. And yes, these type of things will work with gold as well. Although I don't even want to scrape a little bit of gold off. It's like every time you scrape, there goes $40. There goes $40. So, all right, next we have Stranger Than Fiction. So where we're going to start today. And so I moved the order up a little bit. Willow Sunshine Prepping segment, still here this week. Going to come a little later on in the show just to kind of break up the big pile of news all at once. Just always trying some new things. And we will get the echo situation figured out here for you guys, but I'm just going to keep testing it and figuring out what's going on. It's the strangest thing. All right. So what do we got for you? Next, we have the Texas wildfires. Did you guys see that? This is an article from Newsweek, and it's about a week behind on this, but it was one of those stories that I really wanted to kind of fill in and chat about just a little bit, because not just a wildfire, but the worst wildfire in Texas history. All right, here it is, guys. Texas residents face home insurance crisis after devastating wildfires. This is an interesting take on it. We're going to dive into the whole idea of being underinsured or not being insured whatsoever. And it's one of those things that as preppers, I think we have an inherent need to be insured. And a lot of times folks don't always look at that. The devastating wildfire that hit Texas over this past week killed 2 people and burned an estimated 1.3 million acres in the state. It's expected to spell disaster for many homeowners whose properties have been damaged by the blaze, but whose homes weren't insured. Well, speaking of insurance, just before I went live, Becky came home and said, hey, the daycare here in Provost had a bit of a flood. Looks like the ice maybe jammed up in the gutters. It's backing up, and it got all under the downstairs laminate floor. So it looks like I don't know. I'm not really sure what happened, but we're pretty sure there's an issue on the outside of the cinder blocks. So, all right, 1.3 million acres. Ugh. The fire, the largest in the history of Texas, ignited last Monday in rural areas surrounding Amarillo. So it happened. Where does it go? The governor issued a disaster declaration for 60 counties affected by the fire throughout the state, activating additional state emergency response resources to tackle the critical situation. We're going to dig into this. And for those on the audio only, there's a picture of a lady surveying the damage. All that's left is some bent up metal. Looks like metal siding, metal roofing, something like that. Rural Texans, now here's where the rubber meets the road, folks. Rural Texans are more than twice as likely to go without insurance coverage than their urban counterparts, partially because home insurance premiums have skyrocketed in the state. The average cost of home insurance in Texas is currently $4,142 a year, much higher than the national average of $2,777. That makes Texas the state with the 5th highest home insurance premiums in the entire country. Now, that may be true. I mean, it is true. Sorry, back up, Tim. Don't say something like it may be true when it is true. That statement is true. I researched that before we went to air. And depending on which data table you look at, you will find that Texas is definitely in kind of the top 5 for expensive insurances. What it doesn't take into account when they talk about these things is, for the most part, Texas being one of the least taxed states in the country. So a lot of I did look at the numbers to see what some of the cheaper insurance companies were, or states were. And you're going to guess what? It's states that have taxpayer subsidized insurance rates. That's where, so, you take it in one hand, out in the other. So if you're not paying it in taxes, you've got more money to buy private insurance. There you go, right? All right. On Monday, authorities expressed optimism that the fire, which had burned for over a week, would be contained in the coming days. The weather is going to be favorable. The winds are going to be much lower. The humidity is coming up, and that is fantastic news for us. So, again, here's one thing. My good brother Chris Dixon is in here this evening. Something that we know in Alberta, we are very much contingent on weather. Once a fire starts, you're way better off suppressing the fire beforehand, because once a fire starts, heaven help you, you are 100% at the mercy of the weather. We've had fires that have gone all the way through the winter here. So, yeah, kind of not a good thing. But here's the first question. Why don't folks have insurance? And number one, well, it could be because of the cost. It could be a lot of reasons. I don't know a lot of people who decide to go without insurance, but I will say, when I first started my handyman business, I didn't run insurance for a good solid year because the cost didn't outweigh the benefit at that time. So you have to look at it and wonder. But if I lived in a home, my castle, my bug-in location, sure as shit, I'm going to find a way to have insurance on it. Shop around for insurance. I have a broker. We have a broker. His name's Nathan, and he has treated us so well for many years. And what he will do every year is he will take our insurance and he'll shop it around to try to find us the absolute best rate. You can do it on the internet. You can do it through a broker. You can do it yourself if you want to. Call around to a bunch of insurance companies, but don't not shop around for insurance, because, again, an hour on the phone could save you $1,000 a year. Your mileage may vary, but it's the type of thing that Becky and I, we haven't done in a couple of years, but we used to call all of our utility companies once a year and discuss with them, like, okay, is there any better price you can get? What can we cut out that we don't need? And we would just go over everything with a fine-tooth comb, because really at that point, and we probably should be better with it now, we had to, but it was a great way to save money. So shop for insurance. And if you're not happy with what your insurance broker's doing, guess what? Give yourself a minute. Find another insurance broker and say, hey, buddy, what can you do? Because competition is great for the market, right? Like I said, once you get that fire going, you're at the mercy of the winds and the dry temperatures, and, it's bad. So the Newsweek carries on to say, but the state is not out of trouble yet. There will still be an underlying risk for new wildfires in the Texas Panhandle and South Texas until spring green-up occurs in the abundance of green grass vegetation found in these regions. So here's something that a lot of people, I say a lot of people. The reason I say a lot of people is because this is something I didn't know till I moved to the damn prairies. I always figured that the highest risk of fires, wildfires, brush fires, would be in the summer when it gets the hottest and the driest. But for us, that can be part of it. But here in the prairies and down in Texas, it's always the worst time of year for wildfires is early in the year. And you might say, well, why, Tim? Because all the old growth is still there from last year. It's dry. The wind's gotten to it, but you don't have any new, fresh, green grass coming up or green shrubbery coming up yet. And that's the type of stuff that has the saps and the water and the nice leafy vegetation. That's the type of stuff that isn't going to catch fire nearly as easy. So this is the time of year, for folks who are wondering, this is when we should really be careful. And fall too as well can definitely be bad. So until spring green up occurs in the abundance of grass vegetation found in these regions. Makes sense. Here you go. The largest fire in Texas over the last week was the Smokehouse Creek Blaze. Man, that sounds like it's an unfortunately named community for a wildfire. I'm not poking fun, just saying. In Hutchinson County, which burned 1,076,000 acres and expanded into neighboring Oklahoma. Now, one final thing here. They said the fire is still being investigated. Well, that's not completely true. Well, it is, but the utility company came out and said they're pretty sure that the cause of the fire was some sort of power lines that were either arcing, smoking, or touching against something else. So pretty sure they know what caused it. Doesn't make it any better. And it was a powder keg ready to explode simply because the weather was really shitty. A couple other quick thoughts. Have a bug out plan. We talk about this, but I'm not ever going to be the guy that just sits here and reads the news and says, Chicken Little says the sky's falling. We need to talk about solutions every single time. And what is it? A bug out plan. Here's the thing. I can talk about a bug out plan until I'm blue in the face. And I can. And I could do it every single week. And eventually folks are going to get bored. You know what's a lot more fun? Well, maybe not fun, but looking at a news story that just happened and taking some lessons from it. So bug out plan, bug out plan, bug out plan. Know the essential items you need to take with you. As I was putting this show together, I got thinking, we got 10 dogs. And Becky and I haven't really done a plan for bugging out with the animals since our little flock or herd or whatever you want to call it, pack expanded from 4 or 5 to, a baker's dozen, including cats. So something we need to revisit ourselves as well. But beyond that, know what you need to take with you, practice a little bit, discuss it, and plan ahead of time. Have, routes of exfiltration, the whole works. All right, let's go back to the community here, folks. Chris Dixon says, talking about what are they looking to build there now, a 15-minute smart city? Well, a couple of weeks ago, they were talking about how the border wall made a fire worse. So why not incorporate 15-minute smart city while we're at it? Nate says they think they pay $55 a month for their house insurance. I got to check with Becky, but we don't pay a ton here either. It's pretty good. Paul Conrad, thank you, Paul Conrad. This is a great tip for everybody. Go with a local broker that knows the area. I save $2,000 a year on my cottage insurance going with a local broker that knew the area versus a general insurance broker. You know what? That is an awesome point, Paul, because, I did say, go on the internet, check things around, but dude, I will tell you, there is nothing better than having somebody that knows the community. Our guy, Nathan, is a second-generation insurance guy. His father and his uncle, I believe, started the business. He's grown up in the insurance industry. He's grown up in this area. We've lived here 10 years. Nathan's lived here 40. So he knows the ins and the outs, and he knows how to get you the best deal possible. So yes. And then the flip side of that, Chris Dixon said, I just fired my broker, been with him for about 30 years, and he just got complacent and lazy. And that right there, folks, is an example of companies who are they eventually take advantage, or they just take it for granted that they have you as a customer. And that's like a lot of that's like a lot of places like, Bell Mobility up here, for instance. They're one of the big telecom companies. They do everything they can to attract other customers, but they do very little to keep their customers. So keep your insurance brokers honest, folks. And Chris Dixon says, Smokehouse Creek sounds like a great name for a bourbon. It really does. Oh, yeah. And you know what? Well, look at that. So Paul Conrad said, hey, Tim, from southern New Brunswick, just across the bay from where you're from. I love to hear that, man. I went to university in Sussex and used to take the ferry out of St. John, New Brunswick all the time. And on a really good day, you can see the Irving Oil, gas tanks from Nova Scotia, 40 miles across. So kind of cool. And I wanted to back up here right quick. We'll talk some more about this evening, guys, in Workshop Wasteland. But Ellen Kerr said, looking forward to watching the movie Civil War. Looks awesome, and it's released here in Oz. I love that name, Oz, on the 11th of April. I'm stoked about it. I'm going to be on the road. I got to figure out a way to see it. I'm going to be cautiously optimistic, but you'll definitely get a review from me on that movie. Looks like it could be good. Again, go into it with an open mind. Don't get excited and say, my politics don't align. Of course, your politics aren't going to line up with that film, but it's going to be a good one. And just before we went, Jeremy was in the Telegram group just before we went live, and he was talking about Follow, the new TV series coming out on Amazon, and he's also cautiously optimistic. We're going to talk about that a little bit later as well. So Chris Dixon said, go ahead and let us be the guinea pigs here, and go ahead and test out your intros. So I honestly think that I ended up running into, I've got all my settings figured out. So we're going to just go ahead and we're going to try running one of these stingers again for you for Stranger Than Fiction, and we're going to see what happens. And I apologize if we have some trouble with it, but let's give it a go. You guys tell me what you think. Here it is.
If anyone dies while you are kept in your fallout room, move the body to another room in the house.
The time has come for Stranger Than Fiction.
Okay, there we are. So we're into Stranger Than Fiction. I apologize for the late intro, but thought we'd give it a go. And we have another echo, so it's definitely in that mixer. Well, anybody on the audio, I apologize, and we're going to move right along. Here's a good story for you this week, guys. Did you guys catch this one? This is from Yahoo Finance, and it's definitely from a Yahoo of a CEO. Yahoo Finance says, Kellogg's CEO tells cash-strapped consumers, are you folks ready for this? And maybe you've already heard it, and if you have, you probably laughed as much as I did. Tells cash-strapped consumers that cereal for dinner is now a great option. Meanwhile, Pepsi CEO encourages struggling Gen Zers to make meals out of chips and pretzels. And if that wasn't enough, it's not in this article, but I saw an article this week about Wendy's saying if fast food prices weren't high enough already, they're going to go to surge pricing. Well, they talked about it, and the backlash was huge. Basically, if it's lunchtime and there's a huge demand for burgers, they're going to charge you more. Can you imagine? So all of these things come out of what we've been dealing with, and that is nasty inflation for the last little while. It sucks. And, you know, there are some options for getting around it, but I just could not believe that the Kellogg's dude come out and he's like, I mean, this is some serious Soylent Green 1984, be thankful for what you got kind of bullshit here. But he's like, yeah, you know, I know Corn Flakes and Fruit Loops and Count Chocula. I know they're not really a well-rounded breakfast, but if you're hungry and you're broke and you're desperate, why don't you try throwing some milk on it and warm milk, and we're going to call it supper. Oh, dear. All right, here you go. In a recent push to adapt to our changing consumer habits and economic pressures, major food conglomerate Kellogg Co. and PepsiCo are reimagining dinner plates across the nation. Let me back up for a minute. Oh, boy. Anyway, I don't know if you guys, we use Bounce dryer sheets, have for years. I always just use one. Becky uses 2 or 3 quite often, but she's got me trained to use 2 or 3 now because that's what she's happy with. So a few years ago, they started advertising, hey, why don't you run larger loads to save the environment? And you can put 2 or 3 sheets in there. Well, of course they want you to do that because you're going to double or triple the use of it. Another great example of this. So PepsiCo and Kellogg are reimagining dinner plates across the nation. With grocery prices surging by 25% over the past 4 years, these companies suggest that traditional dinner options could take a backseat to more unconventional choices like Frosted Flakes and Doritos casserole. And how soon will they be recommending sawdust? What's the stuff that they put, the anti-caking agent? It's a wood cellulose fiber that they put in Parmesan cheese. Anyway, just saying. The cereal category is a great place for consumers under pressure. In other words, are you already miserable? Are you broke? Do you not have enough money? Well, why don't you sit down and have a bowl of cereal and cry over it for supper this evening? Think about it. The cost of cereal for this line right here. This is why, if you can see it, this is why I put it in red, because it really pissed me off. The cereal category is a great place for consumers under pressure. We're advertising about cereal for dinner. Think about it. Think about it. The cost of cereal for a family versus what they might otherwise do or eat. Jeez, I just blew me out. He's like, just think about it. It's a much cheaper option. Well, no shit. So is skipping supper, but it's not ideal for you. Chris Dixon had one here. Here it is. Cereal is never a great option unless you're starving. It's just not. I mean, we ate our fair share of cereal for many years, and there is one thing that does not stick by you, that spikes your blood sugar, that makes you feel like a bag of shit about 3 hours after you eat it, and that is dry cereal with milk on it. It just doesn't do it for you. Anyway, Nate says bugs next. Absolutely. Chris Dixon says Kellogg's Corn Flakes, taste it again for supper. I thought you were going to say taste it again when it comes back up. Sawdust and cricket legs. Oh, well, you know, you're going to have that full feeling in your tummy, plus with a side of protein. And then Nate says, I'll stick to my rabbits, venison, and pigs. I don't need dinner reimagined. Nope, I don't think any of us need dinner reimagined for us. Anyway, so eat cereal for dinner, folks, from Yahoo News. Kellogg's tells you it's a great option if you're broke. And Nate Lemaster says $6 a box down here, and that's a small box. We buy the 48-ounce bags for $7. Yep, you could buy that again. But this kind of thing reminds me of, have you ever heard of like shit on a shingle? The thing they used to eat during the Great Depression. It was basically like a gravy, sometimes a little bit of meat, and they'd put it on toast. Or, you know, some of those Jell-O casseroles from the 50s and 60s. Jell-O and casserole just does not seem to go together. But this was the type of thing that happened when folks went under hard times. Now, hang on though, because there is a lesson to be learned here, and that could be getting creative with recipes, because we know that there's going to be a lot of folks out there who are probably hurting financially and who are like, you know, cereal wouldn't, no, don't do it. But you might have to think, okay, well, what kind of casserole can I put together? What kind of ingredients might be okay for me and the family? Might be really tasty, but I just never give them a shot before. You know, I'm not gonna say you need to eat organ meat, but something, you know, chicken hearts are one of those things that I absolutely love. That a lot of people, it might turn them off until you try it. Now, me, liver, can't do it. I've tried, can't do it. But again, think outside the box, get creative with recipes. Now, they did say Doritos or chips, and something you can get at almost all the live events here in Alberta. They do taco salad. They just take the bag, turn it on its side, cut it open. They put taco meat, sour cream, lettuce in there, and you can walk around and eat it. Again, might not be ideal for most people, but it's interesting. Now, if there's never been a better reason to garden or to make connections with local producers and to cook food yourself, this would be it. Because otherwise, you're going to be set. You're going to be stuck. No, you're not really going to be stuck, but if if old WK Kellogg Company and PepsiCo have their way, you're going to be eating cereal and Doritos. And I mean, if they're empty carbs, we have got all of this dry goods back here. It's a year's worth of dry goods stashed up. Now, guess what? We don't want to eat that. You know what it is? It's desperation food. It's, all right, shit hits the fan. The grocery stores aren't open. We've run out of all our stored protein. We don't have any protein on the ground. So we're going to go into survival mode. And to me, this is like, hey guys, I know life sucks. Let's go into survival mode. And don't forget, they're great. Oh boy. Anyway, all right, back to the comments. Dixon says, didn't some politician tell us to cancel our Disney Plus subscription if we were broke? Yeah, it didn't work. I'm not sure. Krista Friedland, I believe, is her name, and she's the financial minister of Canada. Didn't like her then, don't like her now. Yeah, there you go. But Ed Celio had the answer. I like this. He said, if I'm going to have a glass of milk, it's going to have Oreos in it, not cereal. And to be honest, the Oreos are probably just as good for you. Back it up just a moment here. So whenever we go to these volleyball tournaments, something I've noticed recently is all of the vending machines in the schools have gone to healthy options. And by healthy, you know, some of the snacks aren't that bad, but the drinks are almost okay. So you have vitamin water, you have smart water, you have sports drinks, and you have fruit juice in a can. And there was this one lady there, and whatever your thoughts are on Diet Pop, I get it. But she said, you know, it really would be nice to have an option of some Diet Pop in that machine. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you because I drink my fair share of Diet Pop. And I looked at her and I said, you know, just for the record, that all of these fruit juices that are in here more than likely have more calories than if they just had straight soda in these machines. And one lady looked at me, she's like, no, that's not true. And I'm like, okay, have a nice day. So, of course, my smart ass, when I went back and sat down and looked, I looked up a can of Coca-Cola and a can of apple juice, and the can of apple juice had 200, no, not 200. It was like 20% more calories in a single can. Now, I know we're not talking about the vitamins and the minerals and whatever else happens to be in there, but if we're just talking pure calories and sugar, there's tons in that. So there you go. All right. Nate Lemaster said, shredded venison, corn, green beans, and potatoes. We have that canned here. Love it. Oh, me too. Hey, Mitch, great to see you. Chicken hearts, I love them. I do too. Beef heart, deer heart, all of the above. And add to learn how to cook, make connections with your local community, and grow vegetables. Chris Dixon says, and move out of the city. Yep. Nate Lemaster, if the shit hits the fan, you're going to need those stored dried goods for the calories. 110%. Redfly Media says, stack up and stock up on canned sardines. That way you're getting protein. For sure. That's, for us, the main reason why we bought the freeze dryer is because that was a big lack in our preps. We have some canned goods on the shelf, but we kind of got out of enjoying canning over the last few years. So instead, we've gone this way. So there you go. And Digger says that those dry goods are share with your neighbor's food. 110%. In the words of Stephen Harris and someone else too. I can't remember who it was. It's easier to feed your neighbors than to shoot them. And I agree. I'm not telling anybody to shoot your neighbors. I'm just saying it's definitely easier to look after your community. That's going to be a theme throughout the evening tonight is community, because there's been a bunch of different posts that kind of tie into that theme. So, all right. Next story on Stranger Than Fiction. There, just pretend like I did the intro there. And we'll figure out what's going on another day. You ready for this one? Something else happened in the Donner Pass. I know. Did you guys hear about the nasty hurricane-style blizzard that ended up coming through? I-80 reopens. This is from AccuWeather.com. I-80 reopens. Digging out underway after monster snowstorm buries Northern California. Without sounding ignorant, I quite often forget that it even snows in California, let alone feet and feet of snow or foots and foots of snow. I'm not sure what that is in metric, but we'll try it. Interstate 80 over Donner Summit was reopened Monday afternoon to all vehicles with chains or with snow tires and four-wheel drive. So, 100-mile stretch of I-80 had been shut down since Friday. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. 4 days it was shut down, and then it was finally reopened to four-wheel drive vehicles with winter tires or chains on your tires. Yep, making sections. Friday, as the biggest storm of the winter, unleashed feet of snow, making sections of I-80 to the west and north of Lake Tahoe impassable by blowing snow piling up in the lanes. Traffic became snarled, and hundreds of motorists were stranded. Whew, that's scary, very scary. In life-threatening conditions over the Donner Pass. Now, they weren't in wagons, and no one had to resort to chowing down on their neighbor, sharing their neighbor's food. Anyway, moving on, Tim. Troopers and other authorities responded to dozens of collisions, including cars sliding into snowbanks or getting stuck over the weekend. More than a dozen ski resorts in the region closed. You know shit's bad when the ski resorts shut down, including Palisades Tahoe on the north end of Lake Tahoe. You ready for this? Which had to close chairlifts for 2 days due to reported 6 feet of snow over a 3-day period. 6 feet of snow, 72 inches. Let's go into centimeters. So 72 times 2, 150. You're getting close to 200 centimeters of snow. The biggest storm in my lifetime I ever saw was around 100. So high to extreme avalanche danger is expected in the backcountry through Sunday evening throughout the Central Sierra, including the greater Lake Tahoe area, the National Weather Service reports. Okay, so here you go. Pay attention to the weather and don't travel. There's no way this storm, it was not unexpected, but it did come through pretty quick. But pay attention to the weather and don't friggin' travel. You know, Becky and I ran into that trouble last year, and we all make mistakes. I didn't look at the weather, didn't realize that shit was going to go sideways on 420 and ended up, going to a crawl for 3 or 4 hours on the highway. So if you see something like that's coming, man, unless you're essential, don't go out there and risk your life. Be prepared. Just because you're in California doesn't mean you're not going to get some snow, at least where these are. So be prepared to stay in your vehicle in the winter if needed. It sucks, but you know what? Being prepared could end up saving you just a little bit. But here's the next thing. In a pileup, this is something I learned a few years ago. If you're in a pileup, you know what a lot of people want to do? What happens? They come in, they get stuck, they run into a vehicle in front of them, and they're like, I got to get out and look at the damage. More people are killed when they get out of their vehicle in a pileup like that, when the next set of traffic comes up behind them, slams into them, and then throws them up against the 18-wheeler in front of them. So stay in your vehicle, keep your seatbelts on, stay loosely with your hands on the steering wheel. Tell your kids to do the same thing. Just sit there and kind of lightly brace yourself until you know the threat is over, because that's when you're really going to end up, sliding sideways. It's not good. And don't go into the backcountry. They talk about the backcountry and the avalanches. Man, I couldn't even imagine. Winter tires, four-wheel drive, tire chains, all of that. In other words, just have the gear prepared to do it. Don't go if it's going to be bad. So here's the thing. This isn't the first time something bad has happened in the Donner Pass. It wasn't called the Donner Pass last time. Now, those folks were in covered wagons and they had livestock with them, and they took some shitty advice from some people and ended up getting stuck there. And if you don't know the story, or if you haven't heard it, some folks died, succumbed to the elements, and for protein, they partook. Let's put it that way. Not a good thing. Now, these folks were only stranded for 4 days, so probably the worst they had to do was melt some snow and drink it. But thank goodness that it never got crazy enough that they ended up needing to do something like that. But again, it's just a reminder of how shitty things could be. Whew. And to think that the folks they were with, I was reading about the Donner Pass earlier today. These guys went through what wasn't the Donner Pass at the time, but the folks they left behind, they took the safe way. They took the Oregon Trail. I don't know if they died of dysentery or not, but there you go. All right, let's take a look at the community comments here. And Nate says, how many of them got eaten now? Oh, boy. Digger's got 4x4 and can go anywhere. And Sandy Stark, great to see you, Sandy, said, I wonder how many had a winter survival bag in their cars. Well, with my new truck, just finally just got home today. It's the first time I've been home, and I can put all of my gear back in it. For about 10 days, I was driving without any of my gear because I had to basically be ready to swap my truck out at any moment, and I hated it. I told Becky, I'm like, I feel kind of naked. But anyway, there you go. All right, final story of Stranger Than Fiction this week. And this is one that I picked up from Cam and Colby over on Casual Preppers. And if you listen to them, if you don't, why aren't you? Because, man, their stuff is great. This isn't an ad for them, but this week's episode, they did a review on the movie Greenland. I love they do once a month post-apocalyptic movie review, but they do the Mad World segment. This was a story there. And this is from the register.com. Cyber attack downs pharmacies across America. Now, it was worse in some places, better in others, but overall, it was still kind of a shitty situation. IT provider Change Healthcare has confirmed it shut down some of its systems following a cyber attack, disrupting prescription orders and other services at pharmacies across the United States. That sucks. The technology outfit is one of the largest in the country of its kind. It's used by pharmacists to check patients' eligibility for treatments and process orders for medication, depending on their insurance situation. Pulling the plug on its back-end services have hit pharmacies relying on its tech, including CVS, and forced some folks to pay their medication at full price in cash. There's so many issues there. But one thing I thought of was, if a situation like this happens, make sure you've got at least your bottle you can take in to show them. Because if they can't look it up, because we just go in, we're like, hey, want to fill our prescriptions? Okay, look it up in the computer and you're good. But they ain't going to do that for you if you don't have some kind of proof, right? Keep cash on hand or some sort of way to pay, because a lot of these folks who are used to going in and maybe getting their prescription for pennies on the dollar ended up at CVS anyway, having to pay full price, and then hopefully, if all goes well, getting reimbursed down the road. And some of these were life-saving prescriptions that were needed. Now, we're just talking about CVS. So I did some Google foo earlier. Really, I just typed in, hey, Google, how many CVS pharmacies are there in the United States? And it came back with well over 9,100. In the ballpark of 10,000 pharmacies for just one brand across the country. And they were not able to process prescriptions based on insurance. That's bad enough. However, there was more. The trouble appears to have started on Wednesday, and at the time, the company said it was experiencing enterprise-wide connectivity issues. That evening, it confirmed it was experiencing a network interruption. Ready for this? Dun, dun, dun. Related to a cybersecurity issue. Once we became aware of the outside threat, it was in the interest of protecting our partners and patients. That's what they always say. That's why they locked our bank account down a couple of weeks ago, and we still haven't gotten back into it. We took immediate action to disconnect our systems and prevent further impact. So, first thing that happens, you have a bad actor or a bad character who infiltrates security system wherever it happens to be, and they're like, there's somebody in here who shouldn't be in here. Plug, and they pull the plug out. Because they have to. I get it. I totally get it. You got to cover your ass, my ass, and everyone else's ass. Sound like Clark W. Griswold there. So when it comes down to that, it's the only way to make sure that whoever's in there tinkering around in the connections can't keep tinkering. But the worst part of that is that they end up shutting everyone else out of the system. So for 9,000 plus pharmacies across the U.S., they couldn't file their insurance claim. But there were some other ones. So let's go a little further here. Healthcare executive who wrote on the Forbes article said because of the Change Healthcare issue, he had to pay cash price for a prescription at CVS. My only option is to return to CVS when the system is back up so they can apply my insurance contract pricing and process a refund. However, give me 1 second. I got to let my cat out that I didn't know was in here. Come on, kitty, go on out. So there you go. Live radio every single time. And Michigan's Sure Health was unable to process prescriptions at any, not just insurance, but prescriptions, period, at any of its family pharmacy locations on Wednesday, also due to the healthcare outage. So some were just bad enough that they couldn't do their insurance. Others were bad enough that they couldn't even file prescriptions. Another reason to have extra prescriptions on hand. Last weekend, I read it on the internet. We talked about life-saving drugs and different kind of approaches to stockpiling some of those medications so that shit like this, what do they say? You call it prepping and we call it a Tuesday. So Tuesdays like this ain't going to hurt you that bad. United Health just told the stock market via America's Securities Watchdog that, and this is in quotes, it's from the company, a suspected nation-state associated cybersecurity threat actor. That's a lot of words for saying, somebody from another country infiltrated a health system nationwide, is responsible for the attack on its systems this week, and that this person gained access to parts of Change IT's environment. There you go. And that's the situation. So what do we think? Hard copies on hand, number one, of your prescriptions. Take pictures of your prescription so you have a backup of it. Keep cash or some way to purchase your prescriptions that, okay, if you have insurance and you're relying on insurance, don't always rely on insurance, things like that. Imagine not being able to fill your prescription, but make sure you have your prescription enough on hand if you can do it. Just work on it, right? And the worst thing about these infiltrations, this is what really bugs me, is they don't know how they got in. They don't know how long they were in there. They don't know what they did while they were in there, and they don't know what information they accessed. All they know is some dude was in there, or dudette, or whatever, rattling around in the old information technology highway, and they might have done something, they might not, and to be honest, they probably don't even know whether they can keep them out to be going forward. That sucks. So again, just a good illustration of how fragile our info technology networks are, and where do you go from there? All right. Ed Celio says, when you said, hey, Google, I quickly learned where my local CVS pharmacies are. And I spelled that so that it wouldn't happen a second time. And Nate says, yes, we call it prepping. Grandma called it a Tuesday. There you go. Difference between a generation. And Rachel says, so glad I don't have any necessary prescriptions. Just a painkiller and a muscle relaxer for just in case. Better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Yep. And Digger says we should really hire some of those guys to work on our side. Yeah, I wish we could. I wish it worked that way, but it just doesn't seem to want to now, does it? All right. So, first sponsor mention of the evening. I was on the show last night, Kentucky Sustainable Living, with Jason. We just chatted about, I'm going to be going there in less than 2 weeks. Well, in 2 weeks, I'll be showing up, and I'm going to be speaking on the poverty mindset. Still tickets available, but more importantly, they're also having a radio and, not together, but two separate events beforehand, a radio event and a first aid event with Chuck Peoples. So if you're interested, go to Kentucky Sustainable Living. Just type in Kentucky Sustainable Living Festival into Google and check it out, because I'm excited. I'm going to be there. And if you're interested, I know tickets are pretty cheap, so give them a go, guys. And Aaron says, no life-saving prescription here, but glad we got off them that we had and switched to more natural things. Absolutely. And if that's an option for folks, go that route for sure. You know, last week, the dude was talking about anti-rejection medications for a organ transplant. That's the type of thing that turmeric ain't going to help. But there's lots of things that just getting yourself healthy will get you off a lot of medications. So there you go. All right. Next, we have Workshop Wasteland, and this is a good one. I'm excited tonight. We're going to go a slightly different route with it, but first we're going to actually talk about what Jeremy was talking about earlier today, and that is the new Fallout TV series. If you guys, okay, I've never played the video game. My son has played the Fallout video games for a lot of years. And to back up slightly, if you don't know what Workshop Wasteland is, it's where we take a look at post-apocalyptic and dystopian fiction, books, audiobooks, movies, video games, the works. Because there's a lot of us that are into that sort of thing, and folks are always looking for a recommendation for something to watch when it's relaxing time. When they get shit done, you got to shut that down for a bit and recharge your batteries. So I'm excited about this. I've never played the games, never really watched any of it, but this Fallout TV series, if you guys know Blast from the Past, it's one of my favorite movies. It's a comedy. Anyway, this starts very similar to that. And now, of course, it's R-rated with language and blood galore, but the setting of the Fallout TV series looks awesome. And another quick thought, something that Amazon doesn't typically do, they typically release their episodes, traditionally every week. That's what they've been doing with The Boys and that sort of thing. Well, this Fallout TV series, all episodes are going to drop on April 11th. So mid-April is going to be a great time for post-apocalyptic fiction. And this is going to be a good one. Again, I'm going to be on the road. Probably going to have to wait. It sucks because if I were home, I would probably do on the secondary channel a weekly review of this. Becky and I probably would. But we're going to wait till we get back, and we'll probably still do some of them. So if you haven't checked it out, I love it. It's a mix of 1950s nostalgia thrown in with some post-apocalyptic wasteland. It looks entertaining. They're young actors and actresses with a couple of established character actors in it. I think it's going to be fun. Darkwing Dave over on Twitch, great to see you, says, I play and stream Fallout 76. The community is very interested in this series. I hope, for what it's worth, I hope they do you justice, man. I hope they give it the Sonic the Hedgehog or the Mario treatment, and they are faithful. Oh, even for that matter, The Last of Us. I hope they're faithful enough to both make the hardcore fan happy and to bring in a lot of new eyeballs onto the series. So there you go. Just as long as it doesn't have Fallout Boy in it, Nate says. Absolutely. Okay, so that's all I had for new news. But we had a great conversation on the Workshop Telegram group earlier this week, and someone said, hey, I know you've done episodes in the past talking about your favorite post-apocalyptic films. And yes, that is true. So I put a list together, sent some of the episodes, but what I have been doing over the last while is I've been making this list by the decade of films that I really love. And I thought, hey, you know what I'm going to do when there isn't a lot of news in the Workshop Wasteland segment for this week? I'm going to give you 3 or 4 of my favorite films that are just, hey, you know what? If you're looking for a good recommendation for, some prepper porn or some end of the world, whatever, give one of these a shot. Every one of these come with the Toolman Tim seal of approval. I've watched them, I've enjoyed them, and I've added them to my list. So Here are four, I almost held up 5 fingers, 4 of my favorite post-apocalyptic or apocalyptic films from the 1950s and the 1960s. The first one is the very first post-nuclear age or nuclear age post-apocalyptic film. So we're going to put these up here. I've got them on IMDb, but for those on audio, I'll give you a quick synopsis of it. But this one is called 5. It has a very low budget. It's probably the one I've seen the most recently. I found out about it and I thought, oh man. Now, basically the entire, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but the entire world, there's 5 people left. So it's a very kind of comfortable storyline that you've dealt with in the past. The budget on this wasn't great, but here's the one. It's an hour 33, 1951, and it's titled FIVE, not the number 5, in case you have to look it up. The world is destroyed in a nuclear holocaust. Only 5 Americans survive, including a pregnant woman, a neo-Nazi, a black man, and a bank clerk. It almost sounds like the start of a joke. However, it's not. It's a great, really, really, really good film. I'm a sucker for black and white films. I'm a sucker for small cast films. Now, this one has the entire world to explore, but it still feels claustrophobic. Of course, the dialogue is on that melodramatic 1950s bent, but I loved it. It's really good. The quality isn't as good as some of these other films that'll come a little further along, but if you're looking for a good movie, that might just scratch that itch. It's not as good as the rest of the films on this list, but I really enjoyed it. So give it a shot. All right. So number 2, this is the next one. This is from 1959, and it's called On the Beach. And if you haven't seen it, or if you haven't read the book, it's a great film. It's an even better book, but it's not a happy book. It hasn't there. You'll know right away that there's no happy ending in any of this. It's made abundantly clear from the start. So I'm not spoiling anything, but it has a really good cast as well. So after a global nuclear war, the residents of Australia, Ellen, if you haven't seen this, after a global nuclear war, the residents of Australia must come to terms with the fact that all of life will be destroyed in a matter of months. It has Gregory Peck, Ava Gardner, Anthony Perkins, who I believe goes on to be Norman Bates, and Fred Astaire. Great film, great acting, bleak as all get out. It's not as bad as The Road. Definitely worth watching once. I loved it. Give it a shot. So these, of course, all these films come out in the 50s and 60s, and they all play off of all of that nuclear age anxiety that is just permeating all of culture. So give it a shot. Check that one out. All right, so that's 2. Number 3 is from 1960, and this is one that I've seen more recently as well. So I've gone back and tried to fill in the blanks of some of these films that I've missed, because there's a lot of them out there, but I've seen almost all of them. So it's been kind of fun to go back. I watched this one in bed one evening, or a couple of evenings. Instead of watching YouTube videos, I just watched a movie once in a while. And I did that with 5 as well. So the next one is The Day the Earth Caught Fire. And it is a good one. Way better than I expected. And let me see if I can find this for you. All right. So the tagline says, when the U.S. and Russia unwittingly, I guess that's the right word, test atomic bombs at the same time, it alters the axis of rotation of the Earth. Now, that sounds like a really cheesy mockbuster that you would see today, like Moonfall, for instance. This is nothing like that. This is a movie, again, that comes out of that nuclear atomic anxiety that is really well acted, has existential dread throughout the entire thing, a really taut script, and just really almost plays a bit like a political thriller. Not going to spoil the ending, but, it's one of those things that they've altered the axis of rotation of the Earth, and they're getting closer and closer to the sun. So you can imagine it's an environmental crisis film. Janet Monroe's in it. She is just great. Edward Judd, and directed by Val Guest. So again, this one's from 1960, and you can see Hollywood working, from 1951, the quality of 5 onto On the Beach, and then The Day the Earth Caught Fire. All of these are great films, but My favorite one from the 50s and 60s is yet to come, and I'll share that with you in just a moment. But again, this one here, The Day the Earth Caught Fire, if you just read the tagline and a synopsis, you're going to think, oh, this is going to be one of those low budget, just junk films. And it could be nothing but the contrary. Anyway, beyond that is just this dread that's always on you, but it's not quite as pessimistic or as nihilistic as On the Beach. All right. So 1962, this is actually a film that I use in my intro once and in my transitions a couple of times. And I love this film. Saw it years ago, and I've probably seen it 7 or 8 times since. And that is Panic in Year Zero from 1962. It's $1:33 long. The acting is incredible. The storyline is great. The script is taut. For a 1960s film, it really does not slow down very much at all. Now, a really cool thing about this is this Ray Milland. He's the main actor. He also directed the film. That does not happen very often. And when it does, it tends to be a vanity project. And that is a 4-letter word around this household. But this is as far from the case as you can get. This entire film. Now, if you can see the trailer that's kind of playing without any audio on it, it looks really fuzzy. Well, the black and white editions that are out there that you can rent on Amazon or YouTube are high definition. They are gorgeous. This is one of the best looking 1960s film that I have seen in a long time. Here you go. A family leaves LA for a camping trip just before hydrogen bombs destroy the city. In the midst of the chaos, the father must fight to keep his family alive along the highway. This film, which is 62 years old, plays like an outline to almost any of the books. It's got kind of a going home series, any of those Patriots. It's so good. It is the originator of this storyline. Family finds out that nukes were dropped or some situation happens. They have to bug out to the wilderness. They have to stock up with supplies. They're stuck in an RV. They deal with marauders. So if you get a chance, watch it. This is my favorite of the 4 I recommended tonight, but any one of them you won't mind. I hope you won't. Keep in mind, these are all 1950s and 60s black and white films. None of them are shot at the editing or the pace that Marvel movies are shot at today, of course, but they're all definitely. I love being able to recommend some of these films. So I hope you enjoyed this slightly longer dive into the workshop wasteland, because folks quite often message me and say, hey, Tim, what's a good recommendation for a post-apocalyptic or dystopian film? So we're going to work through the decades. Next week, we're going to do the 70s, and we'll go from there. All right, let's take a quick look at the delinquents in the chat and see what they have to say. Going back to the Mario film that I mentioned, Mitch says, that's not the 1993 Mario, is it? I added some words there, but I just wanted you guys to know what he was talking about. If you haven't seen that abomination, it is not a good film. And Nate says, I need to listen to The Road before I watch it. I wish I'd have done that. I just can't bring myself to rewatch that film. I don't even believe I was a dad when I first watched it. So I really don't think I could watch it again. That is one of the darkest films out there. Nate wants to know, is The Beach on audiobook? 99% sure it is. Sorry, On the Beach. It is. I originally read it on my Kindle of all things, but yes, I know I've seen it out there before. One thing I didn't do, folks, was add these 4 movies to the description this evening, but I will do that afterwards. So if anybody's listening to this, those 4 films will be in the podcast description, and I will add it to YouTube as well. So Nate says, I just listened to a book about the poles flipping and how it might be related to the Mayan calendar. Dixon says Panic in Year Zero is great. It's on YouTube, but it's a playlist. Yes, I forgot about that. It is. And Red Flyer Media had a great conversation with you earlier today. I'm going to add these old films to my watch list. I love them. Here's what I would love to hear from you guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts on any one of them. Or if you've got other suggestions, throw them to me, because I must be one weird son of a bitch, because this is one of my passions, is movies all about the world ending. I'm not sure if it's cathartic or if it helps me manage anxiety, or there's some deep-seated fear in there. But man, I've been a post-apocalyptic junkie since, I don't even know, since high school at least. All right, so what do we have next? Oh, this is a good one. We now have Sunshine Prepper. So for those who don't know, Willow is our roving reporter who scours the interwebs for prepping-related news stories, comes back with her particular bent of sunshiny happiness, shares some of the maybe the more down stories out there, but comes out with solutions and with a smile on her face to hopefully make you feel just a little bit better. And you know what's cool? I've said this, the last 2 weeks we didn't end up meshing on what they were. So for the first few weeks, she'd pick a story and I'd invariably have that same story in my notes. Last week didn't happen. This week, she talks about 3 stories in a 5-minute segment, and 2 of them I talked about. So that means they must be rather important between the 2 of us. So let's bring up Willow, Miss Sunshine, and we're going to play the story for you. Here we are. Bring it up. We'll put her full screen, and here you go, guys.
Hello, and welcome to today's Sunshine Prepper News. I'm Willow, the Sunshine Prepper, here to spread a bit of positivity on the unavoidable doom and gloom. Today, I'm going to touch on 3 disasters, Marches kicking off pretty eventfully with record-breaking blizzards, wildfires, and banking shenanigans. Before we dive in, join me for a nice long, deep breath inside to oxygenate our blood and relax our nervous systems. Okay, first up is the weather. What are the chances you get between 5 and 10 feet of snow fall in parts of California and Nevada, while at the same time, the now largest fire in the history of Texas consumes over 1 million acres? Seems like end of times appropriate weather if I ever saw any. So get your soul stuff sorted out while the sun is still shining. If the nukes don't get us, the weather extremes look like they want to try. So far, there haven't been any casualties from the blizzard, but it shut down Interstate 80 and there were plenty of stranded cars and big trucks. High winds and heavy snow plus power lines equal thousands of people out of power, and they're expecting more snow in that area. It's a good reminder to have your weather preps in order. But man, when you start to look at the wildfire situation in Texas, the blizzard feels more like a fierce inconvenience than a disaster. In the panhandle of Texas, which is the northern part, there are multiple wildfires raging. The largest of them is the Smokehouse Creek fire, which started on February 26th, and as of March 5th, it has burned about 1,060,000 acres. This fire has devastated ranching in the area, killing thousands of cattle and leaving several dozen families homeless. About 400 structures have been lost. There's a situation where emergency services had to evacuate 66 patients twice. Fire is no joke. In the most recent update I found put out by the governor, the perimeter is about 550 feet of the fire that's still currently burning. It's something they're still dealing with. The danger is not over. But despite being such a far-sweeping destruction, there have only been 2 human fatalities so far, which speaks to the excellence of response and coordination of all the emergency services in Texas. There's been an inspiring amount of local support for the families and ranchers affected. When you lose your stuff to fire, it's gone. People are sifting through ashes with mess strainers, trying to find wedding rings and anything left behind. Some people only had 20 minutes or so to grab what they could and get out. It happened really, really fast. It's crazy. I was surprised to find out that Texas regularly has a wildfire season between winter and spring. If you're reaching into your tinfoil hat, 90% of wildfires are started by human activity, but in the end, it's the weather conditions for spreading that initial ember that really cause an event that we call a wildfire. There will surely be quite an investigation, but so far, there's a claim that a power pole snapped and started the fire. It's not likely this was any kind of attack on our food supply, but the results on the food supply will be similar. If you eat beef, get it while you can. The total herd size in the USA is at all-time lows, and this disaster does not help at all. That brings us to our last disaster, which I didn't know what to call other than banking shenanigans. If you're in the USA, this will affect you. So I didn't realize that part of the banking relief from 2020, the whole shut down the economy and all those brilliant decisions, part of that banking relief was that they removed the 3% reserve requirements from the banks. In short, a bank usually has to keep some percentage of the money that they take in the bank. They can't loan it all out. That's been the rule since the dawn of fractional reserve banking, so to speak. But an exception was made because of the emergency. So on March 11th of 2024, the lifeline ends. That super special exception expires, and banks are expected to be able to hold some amount of reserves again. Back in November 2023, the CEOs of Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and JP Morgan were in front of Congress telling them they cannot be held to the 3% standard and will not be able to compete with banks around the world. Whatever that means, what do you think they're saying without saying? I don't know, but maybe it has to do with why insiders and CEOs are selling stocks at near record amounts recently. Now, this doesn't mean that everything goes to hell in a handbasket on March 11th. The public is usually 3 months behind on financial news because of quarterly reporting and whatnot, but it's worth keeping an eye on how things play out during the first 30 to 60 days after the lifeline ends. Will that be the domino that analysts look back on as the ember that torches our banking system to the ground? Only time will tell. Let's take another nice deep breath and sigh. Okay, that wasn't so bad. So what can you do this week to spin the doom into productive action? Will you make sure your blackout kit is good to go in case a blizzard takes out your power? Will you test your bug out grab and go plan? Do you know what you could grab if you only had 20 minutes? Or maybe you'll take out a little more cash in case the banks pull a bail-in, or grab a few ounces of silver. Whatever it is, find some action that is right for you and do what you can to better hedge yourself and your family against the potential doom and gloom. Thank you for tuning in. Sunshine Prepper out.
So I hope you guys enjoyed that one. Willow always comes out with something incredible, and I learned something this week that I didn't know about the bank turning the basically having to keep something quite a bit more cash on hand. I guess they had done away with the reserves, and so now they're requiring them to start keeping a reserve on hand again, something I didn't know about. And it was something that I had to actually a little bit later on this evening with our content creator spotlight. The dude that I'm going to spotlight there actually has a great article, great commentary video on that exact thing. So we'll deal with that as we go along. All right. So next we are going into, I read it on the internet, and just pretend like I played that cool little stinger for you guys and you like that little transition, and we'll go from there. All right. So what do I got for you? Before we go on, Red Flyer Meter says, oh my gosh, she makes it all so cheerful. I love it. I do too. And I'm totally open to doing maybe another 1 or 2 segments like this from folks as time goes on. We'll see where we end up. But if it fits and folks are willing to, commit to a weekly or a monthly segment, something that might be open to. So we'll chat about it. But anyway, so this week, what do we have? We have, I read it on the internet, and this is from user Annie Fennel. Annie Fennel. I lived through a civil war. And this is not hyperbole. This is a true story. I survived a 5-year, and not me, the user Annie Fennel. I survived through a 5-year civil war in the 90s. My family became pros at prepping. So here's some thoughts that they shared, and they're really good. And it sucks that this person had to go through this situation, or that they did, but the lessons they learned are great to share with other folks. Most preppers are doom and gloom, they said, looking at worst case scenario where you're fleeing for your life, shooting at people and eating from cans. You'd probably want to be dead if it were like that anyway, if that's the society that you inherit. However, chances of this happening are super low. Remember that, folks. A total 100% collapse across the world, pretty unlikely to happen. Everyone seems to overlook the key to survival, which is, remember that C word from earlier? Not the word you were thinking, Chris Dixon, but community. Everyone seems to overlook the key to survival, which is other people. To survive a bad situation, you need good friendships and family relationships, trust between people, and the ability to work together to survive, aka COMMUNITY, community. You don't need to hoard a bunch of material goods and fight each other to the death over the remaining can of beans. Have community, build, relationships, economic and personal relationships. Even if the shit were to hit the fan in the U.S. or Western society and the standard of living drops, eventually everyone gets used to it. It's just the in-between time that is uncomfortable. Societies today function with people making $5,000 a year, and they have some type of order, roads, schools, healthcare, and peace. Interesting thoughts. I like that. Periods of unrest are relatively short. Society always reaches an equilibrium and balance, and we get used to new conditions and start rebuilding. It always tends to be, there's a trope in post-apocalyptic fiction that the old man that remembers the times that happened before, they're the ones that wax nostalgic on how things used to be. And they're the ones that quite often seem to be the most miserable because they know what they've lost. Whereas the youngins who have grown up within it, they always say, I guess I didn't really, if you don't know what you don't know, you don't know. In other words, you don't miss what you never had. And I think that's a lot of it. The period of transition, of turning, of change, of whatever it happens to be, would be the worst for the people right in the middle of it. But those that come after it, they're going to adapt pretty quick, especially youngins, because that's what they do. Chris Dixon says, CASH is my C word, the 4-letter C word. Yeah, that wasn't the one I was thinking. There you go. Like they said, periods of unrest are relatively short. Society always reaches an equilibrium and balance, and we get used to new conditions. I like that. That's a really optimistic way of looking at a slow collapse, or a fast collapse for that matter. Definitely worth looking at. So for those who don't know, or those who haven't heard before, I read it on the internet is where I go and take the top story or two from the last week on our preppers on Reddit. And this was the top story, had 604 upvotes. Just personal experience. Nothing trumps personal experience in my personal experience. All right. But it was a short one. So I grabbed number 2. And this one was from Fallen Ones, user Fallen Ones. And they said, one thing I've never heard a prepper say, I'm finished prepping. And I thought, I laughed, I cried, but it is true. So here you go. My prepping journey started out of interest in learning old-timey ways people used to do things. Then it progressed to the fear of the future in this crazy world, and then the addictive personality and becoming obsessed with it. At this point, I think I can honestly say I'm finished prepping. It is what it is. I realize I haven't pondered every possible scenario if shit hits the fan, but I'm confident in the wisdom I've gained these last few years. What I have put back, and how I can now adapt to very tough and stressful situations without feeling the slightest aggravation. I will always love learning new DIY self-sufficient things and different plants to grow for various purposes. But as of now, I'm prepared and have no fear for the future. Well, I'm happy for you. Number one, if it helps you deal with whatever anxiety or fear of the future you have, great. To sit back and say that you've prepared for all eventualities, not so great, but I'm not going to slam you on this. I'm cool with that. For me, and they go, if you read through some of the comments, they're really good. And a lot of folks kind of go down the rabbit hole and they're like, this is where it changes. It goes from prepping to when it becomes a lifestyle. And once it becomes a lifestyle, you kind of are finished prepping because you're not doing it intentionally anymore. It's just who you are. It's become a lifestyle. Being prepared is what you do. Living on a homestead is what you do. Moving to your bug out location might have been what you do. Growing a garden might be what you do, instead of looking at it as, well, I got to prep and got to get prepared. No, I'm just living the life and I'm good. So I really like that. All right, let's flip back over to the comments right quick and see what Nate had to say. He said, I'm not old, but I remember 99 cent gas. My parents remember 25-cent gas. Now it's almost $4 and climbing again. Yep, inflation sucks. And it's definitely speeding up. If I had one solution for you, Nate, if I could offer one piece of advice for everybody out there who's wondering how they can overcome inflation, I would really say 3 words: cereal for dinner. I couldn't give you better advice even if I tried. So there you go. All right. Where do we go from here? Next, we have This Week in the Workshop. And this is where I share the comings and the goings of the workshop, what we've been up to in our life, and for accountability and for inspiration. And that's really what it comes down to. I want to share with you the things that I've been doing. I only had a single layer, one load through the freeze dryer this week, and that was chicken stew. I was not home nearly enough to do it, and so it didn't get done. But what do I got to share with you this week? Lots of cool things. But first off, I don't know if I told you last week or not. You've probably seen the post on social media, but Mrs. Toolman is going to be speaking at Self-Reliance Festival, and I can promise I will be front row center giving her a listen. I cannot wait. I'm so proud of her. It's a big step for her, but she wanted to do it. She did a little salon, they call it, at LFTN last year. She got the bug, and she's my inspiration. So hopefully she can inspire some of you guys. So if you're coming to SRF, she's going to be there. Now, number 2, speaking of events, you may have heard me say last week that I'm not going to be doing a fall road trip, and that is still the case. So then you might say, well, Tim, weren't we going to have another workshop / Two Chicks Homestead get together at Nate and Aaron's place? And I would say, yes, that was the plan. So in order to stick by what I decided and not take a fall trip this year and stay home with the kids, Nate and Aaron have so graciously decided to host the event yet again at their place, but on Mother's Day weekend. So I don't have all of the details yet, but one thing that Nate and Aaron have requested this time is a pre-registration, just so they can get a handle on how many folks are coming. So now Nate and Aaron are in the comments this evening, and if I get this wrong, you guys can correct me. But if you go to twochickshomestead.com, you can buy a ticket for $1. I'll buy that for $1 and see what you end up. That's basically just so Nate and Aaron know who's coming. And so we're going to do it. It's going to be fun. It'll be, I think it's going to be very similar to the form that last year's event took. It was laid back. It was chill. We had a lot of fun. There may have been some bourbon drinking. There was a bonfire. No promises for that this year. I really hope that there is pork belly bites this year. I will help with that. And there you go. So Nate says, yep, it's in the shop. Kids don't need a ticket. There you go. So if you go to the shop at twochickshomestead.com, you'll be able to find what you need. That's all there is to that. All right, what else? So I've mentioned this before. I have been trying to get my Shopify site linked to YouTube. I don't know what I did wrong, but they continue to say I misrepresent myself on Google, something to blah, 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 something. I have tried every trick in the book to fix whatever there is. If there is a Shopify / Google Merchants expert out there that can help me with this, that would be great. I actually filed an inquiry with Google, which should only take 6 to 8 years to hear back from them. But I'd really like to be able to link it. Haven't figured it out yet. It's, again, if I had hair, I'd pull it out. So following last week's This Week in Prepping, immediately following my episode, I get a notice from Facebook saying, your live stream has been removed for your own protection. No, I'm just kidding. For a copyright claim. And I thought, that's really weird. So I start going back through the episode, and I don't see anywhere where there was any audio anyway. So I look at the link, the time frame. So I ended up having a copyright strike, not a strike, a claim against me on Facebook only. And they said during the 82-minute mark, I used a portion of a Scarlet Letter audiobook. Well, number one, Scarlet Letter's in the public domain. But number two, they could own a more recent copy of it. Number three, there was no recording playing whatsoever. And number four, why the hell would I use Scarlet Letter in my show? So somewhere I said a few words that tripped an algorithm that said, hey, you're doing something hokey, hinky, whatever you want to call it. I wasn't. And because of it, my show was not up on Facebook for the last, what was it? I don't even know how many, 7 days, 6 days, I think, until it came back up. So that sucks. And I don't know why that happened, but just before I went live this evening, I get a notification. Hey, by the way, we reinstated your video, so I hope you enjoy it. That's just the way shit happens. So there you go. We had a volleyball tournament. I don't know if I told you about that. We had a lot of fun. The whole youth sport thing is something that I kind of threw the baby with the bathwater out not too long ago. And I was thinking, Anyway, I don't have to go down that whole rabbit hole, but what I am really starting to see is some of the benefits of youth sports. And we're not talking about the health benefits, but we're talking about things that kids just don't get exposed to today. And that's adversity, that's loss, that's defeat, all of these things that have been systematically removed from the government education system. The kids, to some extent, are seeing it in sports. And so that's why I'm starting to think that youth sports is quite a bit more important today even than it was many years ago. And I'm seeing that Charlotte last week, she just dug in hard and had to do some awesome serves that she was struggling with. And I'm proud of her. But for that reason, I'm just kind of sharing that youth sports really could be looked at as a bit of a prep. So there you go. Not a stretch at all. What else? Well, I had James on from PBN last Sunday. What a great interview. Good brother of mine. It was just kind of a free-form conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know the show did really well in the numbers, so there you go. What else? I got a new truck. I know I mentioned it, but I finally actually got it last Sunday. An Army Green. Thanks, David Siegler, for the inspiration on the color. I love it. There you go. Oh, and a really cool prep. The tank has 20 liters more capacity in it. I was really hoping I was going to get a bigger tank this time because I was actually looking at upgrading my last one. So I now have around a 700 kilometer range that I can go, which really helps. Which means that, so 700 kilometers, what's that? 500 miles? I might be a little bit off there, 400. Anyway, so it's a really good range that I can go before I have to fill up. So that, to me, that's my favorite thing. Thanks, B-Man J says, congrats on the new truck. Good to see you. And folks, I just noticed the other day, I don't know how I missed it, our good brother, the B-Man J, is going to be at Self-Reliance Festival. So if you want to learn all about martial arts, honey, and how to get into the acting business. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, Jay is an incredible dude. So I can't wait to see you there, brother. We did a Costco trip last week and picked up a few odd items. You're going to see a review. I'm going to do an impromptu vertical live stream coming up where I do an unboxing of all the stuff I brought back from the States and some of this. So what else do I have? I've got the Costco haul and I just subscribed to the Battle Box. I'm pretty excited to open that up, but I haven't opened it yet. So we'll do that live one of these evenings. I got a couple of new DeWalt hand tool accessories. So after all these years, I finally got myself one of those extensions to hold bits that are magnetic so that I'm not always fighting with the screws falling off. I don't know why I didn't do it before, and then I got a sleeve that fits over. I was going to do a funny motion there and realize it would look really funny if somebody clipped it. So I got a sleeve that slides over the shaft of bits to hold things on. Yeah, got a ton of work done at the daycare in Lloyd. Today was my last day up there until after my road trip. But things are really, really close up there now. It's just that final inspection to come down and say, here's your rubber stamp, here's your license. We're hoping to be open April 1st. It could be sooner, but that's probably where we're at with that. I was going to talk about my short strategy, and I'm not talking about how to wash my undershorts or anything like that, but I think I'll save that for another episode. Or if you guys are wondering, maybe I'll do that for a separate live because there's a lot into it. And if you've noticed, I've been doing a lot of shorts and I've been getting some growth out of it. So move on from there. I ran into a dude from my hometown. So we're 5,000 kilometers away. Somebody I've seen 3 or 4 times over the last 5 years here. And I thought, I need to stop. So if your brain ever says, I really need to stop and talk to somebody, do it. You won't regret it. The worst thing is going to be, I don't know who you are. See you later. Well, it turned out that he lived half an hour from my hometown. He used to frequent the hardware store that I worked at. He's been out here 12 years. I've been out here 10. It's the first conversation we had. So it was kind of cool. And the final thing for the community, for this week in the workshop, is we've had a mini crime spree here in town. And it is definitely, well, let's just say there's illicit substances involved. There was a car stolen just down from, so we're one house where we're the second house up from the main street or the street below us. So the back alley, you go down one house and across the street is the parking lot to the medical center. There was a car stolen out of there. Anyway, we know who it was. The cops have got the dude, but things vehicles have been stolen, break-ins have happened. The same dude allegedly broke into the brand new vet clinic in Macklin, and he's the type of guy that just disappears for a couple of days at a time. They ended up catching him because he left his dog in his truck or his vehicle for the better part of a day. And when the cop showed up to break the window open, he came out all pissed off, and they arrested him. So unofficially, what I'm going to say is that kind of thing in my hometown where it happened before, somebody who got caught by the locals ended up having to wear a boot on their foot for quite some time. And I mean a cast, because of good old hometown country boy justice. So I guess it didn't have to happen here, but moving right along, right, folks? Yep. And B-Man J says, my F-350 would make it with the extra fuel tank in the bed. I have looked at that, and you know, those damn short box trucks, mine is what, 5'8", 5'7". If I were to put, I wanted to put an auxiliary fuel tank in there, but ain't going to happen. Just isn't. I would love to, but yeah, I did pick up a couple of metal NATO gas cans, or NATO style gas cans at Harbor Freight last year. I'm going to incorporate them into the box of my truck as well, just so I have a little extra fuel. But I'm pretty good with 700 kilometer range. That, that basically will eliminate, the way it works, it should eliminate one fuel up each day when I'm traveling down south. So I'm excited about that. And I just got a notification that Nate posted the workshop meetup link in the Telegram group this evening. So if you're interested, pop over there. Not till I'm done talking, though. Don't leave yet. No, I'm just kidding. It's all right. All right. Next segment is the community nail bag, and that's where we take a look at some of the feedback that I get from the audience this week. And there was some good stuff. So here you go. Number one, this one, most of these comments are from YouTube, and the very last one comes from Fountain. If you haven't used Fountain, I love Fountain. It's a great podcast app. It's a great place to get a little tip in Satoshis. That's, the equivalent of pennies in Bitcoin, but it's a great way to do it. Anyway, this one comes from Felgate, and this was on my video for the Milwaukee versus Sharpie professional markers. I was looking for a good marking pen. Neither of them really lived up to the expectations. This guy said, hey, try the Eating 370 marker pens. Marks any surface, instant dry. Not sure what the 370 means. Maybe the nib thickness. Available in different nibs and impossible to smudge. So I actually ordered a couple of different pens on Amazon with some replaceable ink sticks and that sort of thing. I really need to up my carpenter pencil game. So we'll see. But I'm always looking for good recommendations. So thanks. This one comes from Common Sense 1014. Said, this was from some of the polls that I do. Said, look, man, I came from a homesteader life. Being a prepper has many advantages. When my job slowed down, who had a safety net of food to eat from? This guy. It also always had me to all the typing was kind of bad here. I read it in my head and then it didn't work out quite as well. It's also paid off for me to wait out the cost and buy only during good sales for food. Personally, though, I hope we get to advanced renewables. This is the part I wanted to share. I hope we get to advanced renewables before the end of the world as we know it. Would be as bad as if your house, in other words, wouldn't it be great to have vinyl siding that's solar? Could you imagine the hardest thing society has to do would be to start over, grow a garden in place of their lawn? And the reason I shared this was basically, I hope we get to advanced renewables because you guys know, I really do love battery power. It's not the be all and the end all, but I will tell you, you can only store so much fuel. But with solar powers and batteries, that can extend that time by years, by magnitudes. The benefit of battery tools, I love. They're not as powerful as gas overall. I get it, but all the other benefits are awesome. So I just loved hearing some common sense from somebody with the name of Common Sense. Doesn't mean that I'm going to switch my vehicles over to electric, but I sure wouldn't mind having one of those, or maybe one of those electric bikes or something. Next question. This is a question from It's Simple, Aless, and they said, can I ask what editing software you guys are using for the captions? They really liked what I did. And I thought, well, I appreciate you thinking we have a team here. And you said we, because it's just me and some AI. But so they were talking about this Simply Aless was talking about my shorts and how. So tonight, when this show's over with, I will take this link, I will throw it into Opus.Pro. That's OPUS.PRO. And within 15 minutes, I'll have 30 to 35 clips. And lately, 80 to 90% of them have been really good. And simple little things like you guys probably didn't notice this, but the banner above me, This Week in Prepping, and the banner below me, my YouTube link, I shifted them slightly to my left, your right this week, so that when they're clipped in vertical, it now looks intentional. And so just something simple, but Opus.Pro, if you end up deciding to sign up for that, I've got an affiliate link where I can make a little bit of money from. But either way, the program has served me really well these last few months. Next comment from the community nail bag from Anita. Anita, oh my, yeah, I'm not going to read that last name. And I thought this was pretty funny. This again was talking about battery versus gas. And they said, I'm kind of surprised that an older dude like this has that opinion, to be honest. My response was, I'm only 42, right? But the old gray beard really doesn't do me any favors. But I had to laugh. I was like, an older dude, which I probably am much older than this person, Anita. And last name, Dick and me. Yeah, I know, right? What a name. But yeah, I was kind of honored to be called an old guy that had a good opinion. But again, whether you like battery, you don't like battery, it was just nice to hear. Next feedback came from Keith Taylor, 6259. I live in Ashland, Kentucky. The most severe weather I have seen here is an ice storm that hit a few years ago. The temperatures were well below zero. It tore a lot of trees down and knocked out power for weeks. Scary. Not my cup of tea. I've never been in a really bad ice storm before, but I remember the one in Quebec in the 90s. It was bad enough they wrote a book about it. And there was another one a few years ago on the East Coast, but yeah. And finally, this one came from North Star Chris over on Fountain, a fellow Canadian. I really appreciate him. And he just sent a piece of feedback that I really appreciate it. And I was going to share it to pat myself on the back. But he said, really enjoying these podcasts talking about This Week in Prepping. It's a perfect blend of information and entertainment. So glad to watch your journey. And thank you, brother. I'm glad to watch my journey as well. And again, every single week, 1% better, right? Even if that means audio gremlins for a while. But, simple things like new intros, new outros, that kind of stuff. Always want to try to improve the product for you. As long as the message is there and I can shine up the product just a bit, we'll always bring new eyeballs in, won't we? All right. So I've been running a daily polls over on the community page of YouTube because YouTube's been pushing the community page like crazy. So I wanted to share with you the results from our 3 biggest polls this week. Number 1, which skill is most essential? 13% said self-defense, 28% said cooking, 28% said gardening, and if Chuck Peoples was in here this evening, he'd be happy because 32% said first aid. I agree with that. I guess my wording was funny on the question, but really, first aid's the thing that's going to kill you the quickest if you don't do it, right? All right. So next poll, I asked the community, I said, hey guys, which is the most likely disaster that we will have to deal with in 2024? 14% said pandemic 2.0. I added the 2.0 part. 21% said large-scale conflict. I was kind of either talking about a regional or a worldwide war. And 57% said civil unrest. So more than a whopping 50% of delinquents said they think if there is a disaster this year, it will be civil unrest. And I think that's fair. That always tends to be the go-to worry for most folks during an election year anyhow, right? And finally, have you used battery tools for lawn care? 15%, nope, and I never will. That's fair. 11%, yep, but I prefer gas. Fair enough. 18%, yep, it's all I use. And 55% said yes for some tools. So that means folks are getting into battery for lawn care. Doesn't mean it's the be all and end all, but to me, I like battery. I can't get over it. I just do. And has its advantages and its disadvantages. All right. So finally, we have for you the community creator spotlight, which I ended up closing out before we got started. So we're going to see if we can bring this up for you. So each week I kind of showcase a creator that I enjoy that I think maybe you folks would as well. And you know how I basically pick what I'm going to share with you? I go back through and I quickly scroll through my week of watching on YouTube. And if there's somebody that I'm watching a lot of, I'm like, you know what? That means I need to share it with you. And this week, I'm sharing with you a liberal. Imagine that. Here you go. So this week's creator spotlight is Jimmy Dore. And if you haven't seen him, he's a former stand-up comedian who still does stand-up comedy, but mostly focuses on political commentary. And I'm not sure exactly how I found him. I think it was through a Facebook post 3 or 4 years ago. I think it might even have been on the old Survival Podcast Facebook forum. And somebody said, hey, if you're looking for somebody who takes an honest look at the news, but you're not going to agree with everything they have to say, check out Jimmy Dore. And I want to tell you, the dude has some really good insights into things. He hates the government. He definitely doesn't like fascism. He is definitely on the far left of some things, but man, his commentary is spot on. You do yourself a favor and watch some of it because I've really enjoyed it. So today's video, I want to show you, see if I can find the one right here. So today's video 7 hours ago is one of the best videos I've seen in a long time. And it was U.S. banks are buying up lots of gold, and here's why. It's a 20-minute video. He brings on a gold and silver expert, and they actually do quite a bit of talking about entry level into precious metals and into like beginning prepping and that sort of thing. But his stuff is just, yeah, it's great. So give him a chance, go with it. And he definitely loves to tear down the media. So if once in a while you're like, yeah, I just need something where he's making fun of CNN, NBC, Fox News, any of those weapons of mass distraction, give him a shot. So there you go. All right. Oh, and finally, folks, before we close up, don't forget our main sponsor on Thursday night show, and that's Fortress Canine. My good brother Joel, he is in the process of moving from Florida to Ohio, and he's doing, they're doing quite well. I can't wait to see him. I'm going to see him at 2 or 3 events here coming up. But he has the Protection Dog podcast, but really he's a dude that will just inspire the hell out of you if you listen. He'll tell you what to do, how to do it, how to get there, how fat. No, anyway, he will share with you the things that you need to hear to build the life you want to live. So there you are. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I'm going to do my best once again to figure out these gremlins. We're going to have a great, it's going to be a great weekend. This is the first time I've been home for a weekend in a while. We've got great weather. I got home earlier today. And the first thing I did was, so we had a big snowstorm last weekend, and all I had time for when I got home last time on Monday was to do the driveway, the pathways, and the 12 unit. So I got home and all I wanted to do was take out my battery powered snowblower and clean off the decks. The sun got to it. Things are drying. It will definitely help the weather just a bit. And for some reason earlier today, I had the need to look up Lake Mead. And if you guys remember all the doom and gloom surrounding Lake Mead 3 years ago, that basically the entire West Coast was going to die a slow and painful death from lack of water. Well, it hasn't rebounded completely, but it's at its highest point in 3 years. So shit happens. Nature has its cycles, works its way up, works its way down. Can humanity intervene? Absolutely they can, but a little bit of positive news there. I hope folks like to hear it. And the reason I bring that up is because I hope some of this snow trickles down into our water table and makes it slightly less dry for folks. You know, we're pretty good up here, but I'm awful worried about my buddy Chris down south just a little bit further because shit is dry. So all the best. Let's hope we get a little bit of rain and we don't have to deal with this drought conditions for much longer. So anyway, folks, I appreciate you. Tune in Sunday evening. I have an interview show that I think you guys are going to love. I believe this week is Bobby Spags, but I didn't check for sure before I did this outro. So either way, I'm going to be there Sunday evening, 6 p.m. and somebody else will be too. It'll be a great episode. I really appreciate you guys coming on, sticking with me. This show has, it continues to get ever so slightly longer. It may end up someday where we split it into 2 parts, but I love doing it. This is my passion. It's what I get excited for every single week. And I really just appreciate you guys dropping by, being a bunch of delinquents, interacting in the comments, and overall just being the best damn community on YouTube there is. So with that, folks, I appreciate you. And as always, stay happy, stay healthy, and have a great friggin' week.